morning, everyone. A warm welcome to you all. We welcome Dr. MK Ranjtsinhji, our author Divyabhanusinh, Mr. Ravi Singh, and Professor Mahesh Rangarajan. Thank you all for coming together to launch Marg's book, The Story of India's Cheetahs. But before we start the evening, we want to specially thank WWF India for giving us this beautiful space and BNP Paribas for making this evening possible. We would also like to thank our sponsors who have supported the book. Publishing on India's rich culture requires support from invested patrons of the arts. Every volume of Marg takes 1 to 3 years to plan, research, design, and print. We are a small but dedicated team providing a platform for many intellectually rich gurus, craftspeople, artists, and photographers. Our endeavors to take their work to the highest academic levels and institutions the world over. We cannot do this without the kind of help and support our sponsors have shown us today. They are BNP Paribas, Conservation Corporation of India Private Limited, Cyrus Gazda, Dev Kunj Trust in memory of Mr. Kunj Trivedi, Dalip Mathai Nature Conservation Trust, Ishita Realty Private Limited, and finally the Pirojsha Godrej Foundation. A big thank you to all our sponsors. I'd like to call, thanks. I'd like to call Marg's General Editor, Naman P. Ahuja, to the stage, please. Naman.
Good evening, friends, and many, many congratulations to you, Divya. Thank you very much for having not just brought out one of the most stimulating and wonderful books that we've had the privilege to publish in recent years, but also for being such an enormous guiding light for Marg, a true beacon as one of our trustees. And so I think it's particularly important that I should mention a few things about how Marg functions and what is it that we do. Marg has a rather interesting history. It was set up, as many of you may know, in 1946 by a committed group of people in Mumbai, Bombay as it was, who were interested in looking at how design and architecture is going to redefine the modern nation state of the what was to be the imminently independent India in 1946. And this was a group that was led by the writer Mulkraj Anand. And several others joined him, Minette and Anil De Silva, Durga Bajpai, amongst various others. And they set up the Modern Architectural Review Group. Very soon, they came to realize that to really understand what the new nation needed to look like and what kind of urbanism it needed to have, you needed to get to understanding the geology, the landscape, the natural habitat, the cultural history, and there wasn't enough documentation of what India's culture was all about. And so the acronym was very quickly dropped, and we just became Marg, a pathway, instead. Mulk's vision was really one to be able to look forward toward a post-colonial vision, what was going to be the shape of Indian culture in the years to come. Over the past 75 years, the disciplines that Marg has encouraged and published have themselves transformed, and Marg's played some part in that transformation. There was a time when one could have rather gentlemanly scholars writing about Indian culture, which today can't really happen because the universe of those who work in the worlds of every linguistic group and language and dialect in India has become so rich that editorially we're having to deal with consultants in the field of about half a dozen major languages that have to constantly read each manuscript to be able to make it pertinent for our times. What was academic once is general knowledge now very often. New specializations, and there have been shifts in imperatives. And the biggest shift has been, how do you constitute or think about what is the nation or what is national culture? Marg has always looked at South Asia as a united whole and tried not to focus only on the modern nation state. But issues of cultural history have become very closely linked with nationalism and national pride. It was realized very early on that in order to be able to have better informed discussions on all these matters, you have to be able to study culture more comprehensively, and culture cannot be studied without natural history, geography, and the history of the land. I think it is with all of this that in mind that we produced for the 75th year of Marg 6 volumes, which are truly taking stock of what Marg has achieved. These have been in the field of modernism, Indian dance, the field of Indian temples, textiles, Indian miniature and wall painting, traditional Indian painting. And the 6th one is going to be, I should say 6th and 7th really. The 6th one is about redefining what we think of as the linguistic groups and cultural habitus of the Indo-Muslim divide, Sufi and Hindu, and all of these kinds of issues in a volume that's going to come out on the Chandayan later this year. Divyabhanusinh has produced the most defining books for Marg on our natural history, and some of these are available to you for sale over here today. He's looked at our great animals, the rhino, he's looked at the lion, and now the cheetah. Every Marg, as Almitra just said, is not just a narrative of researched history, but it's also a visual narrative. And putting a visual narrative together requires a very different kind of body of research to be able to have one picture lead you to the next and one caption lead you to the next. It's highly specialized. It requires all kinds of help and support. And I'm very glad we've been able to garner that support and have your encouragement in the readership that we do. Thank you very much, Divya. And thank you all very much for coming.
Our sponsors, BNP Paribas, Ms. Manisha Khosla Sinha couldn't come here this evening because her flight couldn't land in Delhi, and she's landed in Ahmedabad instead. So sadly, she's not there. But may I request Mr. Ravi Singh to come and say a few words, please? Thanks.
Let me start by thanking all of you for coming here this evening and joining us for this great event. Well, those of you who are here, obviously your flights were not diverted, even though you came from Delhi, Gurgaon, and all those great areas of our present NCR. I must give you a little perspective of this book. My sort of in the second half of my life, my association with Divya and his family who are here, and specifically to this book really, not generalizing otherwise. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what I think about what's happening in India, a little bit about conservation, cheetahs, etc. So, I think the first sort of allegory, if I might like to say, books are, what they deliver to you, it's like an inverted triangle, but what you get at the end is years and years of hard work, sacrifice, research, bringing people together, suffering editors, the luck of having an organization like Marg, is an outstanding publisher. I mean, Marg, if anything, with the books that they have, and I have been a subscriber to their books since, I think, the late 70s or early 80s. Outstanding books, and really world-class stuff that you guys do. I'm really proud of it because it's, in a way, the best exposition of my country's culture, traditions. And, I mean, Divya's, my association with the Cheetah book with Divya started sometime in the 80s. But to myself, I said, why is he doing a book on a species which is firstly esoteric, it's extinct, and most of the records are in royal libraries and the ex-noble families and so on and so forth. I mean, somehow doesn't fit my vision of India at that time. And, and he brought all these books together, he read all of it, he looked at the paintings, and he did a piece for the government of India on the cheetah and its status, read through all those tomes of Jahangir, and started bringing things together. And then he obviously thought that there is material enough to be writing a book. He wrote his book, Trials and Tribulations of Going Through Publishers, etc. But all the papers he collected, and then it qualified for a doctorate, which he received, not just for this, but a lot of his other work, and including his great knowledge, epitomized by the Cheetah book. And he was inferred a doctorate in Pune, from his old institution. Amazing journey in terms of just the sheer research, and all this time he's a corporate representative. He's a representative of the Tata Administrative Service. And to do this at that same time, and the trials and tribulations, outstanding. I then I'll talk about 2 or 3 incidents. One is that we traveled together discussing cheetahs. He had come into the 2nd or 3rd edition of his book, which was then through OUP, the end of a trail. And we traveled together. We had gone, Divya was the president of the board of WWF India. And he's now President Emeritus. Our current president is here, Mr. Arvind Bable. Some of you met him, know him. And we had traveled for the 50th anniversary of WWF to Zurich. And there was a great function, and all that. You can imagine all the work that we did across the world was displayed in a museum and all that. And from there we took a train and went to a very small but important city in Europe called Brno, in erstwhile Czechoslovakia. We had to go to Austria for some work, and from there we went to Brno, where a person who had read Divya's book and was interested in cheetah conservation was given a tract of land which was an old airport, which was an Air Force airport in those days. And this tract of land had a lot of rabbit and other mammal, and was a grassland. And he imported cheetahs and trained them to hunting rabbits. But the training was through that mechanical, that dragging through the grass with a bait or something. And we saw that whole process, and Divya and I met them. Divya saw met a few cheetahs there, and just an amazing thing. The entire, the way he read the cheetahs and the way of feeding the cheetah, he read it almost like a manual in Divya's book, and that is what influenced him to do what he did. And I'd like to show you some photographs here with the cheetah. And this is one of the cheetahs that were being trained. There must be about 5 or 6 of them. And this is a unique thing because first time in my life I could actually talk to a cheetah who was not, really worried about who you were and what kind of a danger was there. So they were, I wouldn't say they were tame, but they allowed interaction. And this particular cheetah was actually, had been trained in the hunting on the airport. And you can see Divya explaining this to somebody in this little film. Yeah, and these animals really, I have friends in South Africa who have tamed, not tamed but domesticated full-grown cheetahs which were injured, and this is my great filming. So I think it goes upside down also after some time, but anyway, I just wanted to show you this. I thought it would be a bit of a surprise for Divya. And wow, here we are back again. So he's explaining all this. I've got sound here, but I didn't want to risk it. And there you go again. And there are dogs, and there are birds of prey, and that is what interested me at that time. And this goes on. I'll shut it here. This was a great experience. It was too short, and I think just looking at that animal and seeing the behavior, somehow I felt that we'd lost a lot of, in a way, a tradition, in a way, a part of our lives in India, and that we needed to do something to get it back. And frankly, it was just too difficult for us at that time to think the cheetah would ever come back to India. We are a true nation. We are a leading cat nation in the world. Out of the 41 odd cats, I think there are 41 or 42 cat species in the world. 16 are in India. The largest number of species that are there, and I think we give our cats a lot of respect. We have laws enacted for them. We have areas that are segregated for them. And they embellish our lives. They name sports teams, and they have, all these things that you know about. And there are researches now, and the government has programs for conservation and management of small cats. Yeah. So there are things going on at this point of time, and we can go on and talk about it. If you are interested in WWF, you've got a lot of things to say for it. But cheetah introduction in India is something that we could not have thought of, and it's happened. And this whole journey that Divya has brought in here, in a way, it is the end of a beginning. So his first book was called The End of a Trail, and somehow that did inspire certain things. I can't say that the introduction of cheetah was because of his writing, but certainly a lot of the work that went into the book helps towards the management of cheetahs on a day-to-day basis. So this is, and I've been with him. He's collecting photographs, slides, museums, personal collections, taking permissions from the government to take a little piece of skin from trophies, getting the CITES permission to get the DNA analysis done, which is also recorded and written in his book. And going through all these things again and again. It's a tremendous amount of work. So what you actually see, a book is, in my view, is like a universe. There are galaxies out there, there are stars booming out, and then out of that universe comes a meteor that lands on Earth. And that meteor is your knowledge, a physical knowledge of the universe, apart from all the visuals and the telescopes, etc. From there, where you can make out what minerals are there, what happened, how old it is, and all that. By the way, if you would ever want to be interested, there are There are minerals that we have in India that were carried by comets, and these meteorites had those minerals, and they are running out because we are using those minerals, iridium for instance. It's another interesting story. So these kind of values that we get also come from a certain generation that is sitting here. And that generation of India, it is the responsibility of the younger generation to take that knowledge, to understand it, and to make sure that it goes forward. Because after that generation, that knowledge will go. It's happened again and again and again. This is not new. But then it is a responsibility of our generation, Generation X or Generation Y or whatever you might call it, to take this on and take it forward. So there's a lot in there. It's not just a question of a book. I also would like to say that there are incidents in our life where Divya he might talk about it, came about a person calling him from central India to say, I have cheetahs, you come here and I will show you cheetahs. He said, no, you mean leopards? He said, no, I'm an old shikari, I know my work, and they are there, and I can take you to a place where I can show you. Similarly, at that time, I had family somewhere in Mirzapur district. I used to go visiting them and then drive out for the day to a place which is on the edge of Kaimur. And I came across two persons at that time who told me that in this area, on a plateau or whatever area, there are cheetahs there, we can go and show it to you. Of course, I didn't believe them, and this was in the 90s. I'm trying to say that even in Jhala's references in the book, the cheetahs were possibly prevalent till the early 60s, some part of Orissa, other parts of India, etc. And perhaps, in my mind, although we may not want to believe it, these cheetahs were alive when those guys spoke to us. This is what I'd like to think. It's like Santa Claus, after some time you think of it, he's there, but after you're 8 years old, he disappears. So, to me, this is important that they were there. Species don't go extinct so easily. Some of the habitat was prevalent. And I'm glad they're back. And I can say because of the work of my team, a lot of them are here, the work of WWF India, in several parts of India, if we do get news about extinction or the species going into the ICU, we will do a lot to prevent the sort of event that happened in the 50s, where one of our cats disappeared from the scene. And it's not easy. We have species that are sitting in the ICU at this point of time. You know them, the bustard and one or two others. But there are also equal efforts, which all of us are supporting, to make sure that doesn't happen. So never again. But if you do have news and you have concerns, I would say write to the government first. Advise all the others. Let's see. We're not going to happen. India's not going to let this happen again. I think a couple of other things. I think after every publication, every edition, I used to ask Divya, did you get any more news? Did anyone send any more news, some paper, some photo, something or the other? And he said, not really. Even now, after this. I think a lot of work happened because of Raza, who did a fair amount of research. But generally, stuff doesn't come out. And I'm interested as it does. Because I have had contact with all families in Punjab who have seen photographs in their houses of cheetahs after a hunt. And there are records perhaps also in the great bird market of North India, which was Amritsar. There's a huge bird trade. And Amritsar was it was the biggest bird market at that time. And someone told me at that point, said that if there was a market and there was a sale, somewhere along the line that sale would be recorded and that record would be in an archive. So try and find it, and we could never do that. At least I didn't succeed. Divya had some idea but didn't really go very far. But I'm just saying this because if you're interested, you find something, it's worth going after that. And you might find things that we don't know about. I also feel that India's message of bringing, in a way, this life in back into India, in a remote part of India, and something that seems so strange. It's actually the real message that India broadcasts. That in our tradition, in our religion, in our heritage, in our history, we have given respect to life. And that we have this strange sentimental attachment to something that we loved, and we want to see it again, and we brought it back to India, irrespective of all the controversies, all the problems, all the issues. Yeah, we could have left Sariska, empty of tigers. We could have left Panna empty of tigers. What difference would it have made to lots of people? Many people haven't even been to Panna in those areas, one of the most beautiful, dry, deciduous locations of our country. So these are issues that this is a spirit of India. It's like that All India radio tune which we all grew up with, yeah, that touches a chord, and we like to do things which are strange, very Indian, very different from the rest of the world. Sorry, I might be going on this a bit much, but this is what I believe. I also would like to say that where we are today with this book, and Divya will talk a lot about it, there are a couple of other things that I see. It's one of the most beautiful productions of a volume that I have seen today, and thanks to Marg for this. It's one of the most beautiful way of interpreting something, and how someone presents a slide or a presentation leaves an impact on you. This is what that book is about. And I hope that we can distribute it, not we, but all the other agencies, all through India. It will be, of course, be received outside. And I would definitely like to see edition 2 with more material on this. And Divya did add that. I mean, he added that chapter on the caracal. And that kind of work is seldom seen, and I hope that kind of research, that kind of work goes forward. So this has, for me and my team, a great conservation value. Because not only does it talk about a species, it talks about a species the way it was treated in India, and now in the present situation we are starting off another journey, and in a way talks about conservation at a level that's very, very important in all this time. So thank you for listening to me. I hope some of you do take some books, also the cheetah pins that we have worked it took us 6 odd months to make that pin, because the color wasn't right, and every time Divya saw it, he said the dark is not coming out sufficiently, and so on and so forth. So there you are. A lot of work has gone into it. Thank you, Divya. Great to see all of you here. Dr. Ranjit Singh is wearing a cheetah shirt, and we look forward to hearing him. Dr. Mahesh Rangarajan, who whenever I'm in doubt about his point of academics, history, not necessarily only wildlife, he's the person who I speak to. He comes from my tradition of academics, which is history, and it'll be great to listen to everyone. Thank you. I'm sorry I've taken a bit long.
May I request Mr. Divyabhanusinh to come, please, and talk.
Thank you very much, all of you, for being present here. I don't know where to begin, but I think on the cheetah, and it happened quite by accident. And that was because my predecessor, President of the Board of Trustees of WWF, wrote to Mrs. Gandhi that why do you want to get cheetahs from Iran when there are cheetahs, when there were never cheetahs in India before? This is unbelievable, but since his own family had been hunting with cheetahs, but that's what he wrote. And the then Minister for Environment happened to be my cousin brother and Dr. Ranjitsinhji's elder brother, Divyabhanusinh. He passed on the papers to me through Samar Singh, who was at that time the Director of Wildlife, and said, well, look, why the hell don't you look at it and see what it's all about? So I did. At that time I was working for the Tatas with the Taj Group of Hotels, and I didn't have much time, but I put my pen to paper, and at the end of a couple of months, I produced what I called a tentative position paper. And this was the year of grace 1984. What happened thereafter was quite unexpected. Of course, Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated and the Cheetahs were forgotten thereafter. Singh ji passed on this piece of paper, or rather tentative position paper as I called it, to the cat specialist group, which was then having a meeting in Kana. And there, I don't know, I was asked to be present at that time. I couldn't be present. I couldn't go because it was busy time. I couldn't leave my hotels and go. I was at that time vice president or whatever of the Taj Group here. And there this paper got circulated, and a summary of that paper was published in their journal called Cat News. After that, two things happened which I insist can happen only in India, and if any one of you challenge me, I shall feel very bad. Which is that I became a cheetah expert without ever having seen a cheetah in the wild. Also, everybody started calling me Dr. Singh when I had no such thing. So for a moment, I enjoyed my notoriety, I must confess. But after a point of time, I realized that, look, this is not on. Somebody is going to say that this blighter is a charlatan and something needs to be done about him. So I said, okay, fine. Let's get down to doing some real research and let's see what happens. So I got hold of Sanskrit scholars, Pali scholars from Pune. I found only one scholar who was a scholar of classical Greek and Latin in Delhi, Reverend Leonard Persson from Denmark. I went to Arabic and Persian scholars, which is Muzaffar Alam and Azhar Dehlvi Sahab here in Delhi. Urdu scholars, again Muzaffar Sahab. Marathi, I know, I speak Marathi and I can understand Marathi, but I went to Ranjana Kaul. She translated a Marathi document for me. And it took me 10 years to put all this together, and I produced the book called The End of a Trail in 1995. Then I went to my old university, which was London, and I said, look, here is a piece of research I've done. Why don't you evaluate it for a doctorate? Now, those guys have a bigger bureaucracy than we have. So he said, no, we can't touch this. But I said, look, I'm a product of your own school, School of Oriental and African Studies. And here is the research I have done, get it evaluated. No, we can't do it unless you write the book, unless you do the research again. But I said, but who will guide me in SOAS? I don't think anybody knows the subject. Anyway, the argument went back and forth, and finally I came back to India, and I went to my old university, Pune, and I said, look here folks, here is a book. Now these blighters hadn't given a D.Lit for 50 years. In 50 years, by the way, they had given only 3 D.Lits. So they didn't know how to handle this. Finally, they said, all right, since the university rules require that you are an eligible person for a D.Lit, they accepted my book and some other research papers, and then they sat on it for 2 years and sent it to referees outside the University of Pune, and after 2 years, I became a doctor. In the meantime, I also went to Africa and did take a long and happy look at the subject of my research. So at the end of the day, I became an expert on cheetahs, inverted commas. By just going to Africa 3 times, I became an expert on cheetahs, and I got a doctorate. Now, that is how this book came about. Now, the equally interesting thing is how this present volume came about. There is a remarkable Russian scholar who is researching in the Masai Mara on the cheetahs. And she contacted me through another friend of ours, and I was in conversation with her on the phone and on WhatsApp and things. And that was COVID time. So she said, what the hell are you doing in COVID? So I said, I'm doing very productive work. She said, like what? I said, I'm assisting my wife in washing dishes and I'm sweeping the floor. So she said, but then why don't you rewrite the book, the cheetah book? So I said, but I don't want to rewrite the cheetah book. But then I was doing nothing else besides trying to catch butterflies in the house. There's nothing else to do. So again, I put pen to paper, and it took me 2 years to produce this book. So I never wanted to write a book on the cheetah. I never wanted to write the second book on the cheetah. But here it is. For what it is worth, I present it to you. Let me tell you very briefly what the book is about. As I said earlier, it is a journey of this animal through the ages, from prehistoric times to its extinction in the Indian subcontinent in 1997. Remember the date? The last cheetah report on the Indian subcontinent was 1997 in Balochistan, and one cheetah skin which was found in Islamabad later on, about the same time though. So India and Pakistan are for creatures like me and you, human beings. For the cheetah, it's the same landscape. So the last cheetah to be seen on the Indian landscape or Indian subcontinent's landscape was 1997, not 1948, not 1962, not 1972. This is the date, as far as I'm concerned, is the most important date to me. The whole thing, of course, this present volume also brings the story up to date, up to, it went to the press, I think, sometime at the end of February or middle of February. So this book does not deal with the present program as such, but it deals with the tortuous journey that the cheetah went through in independent India from 1952 onwards, when the Indian Board for Wildlife said, we must do something about the cheetah, by which that poor cheetah had almost gone. And from 1952 onwards, back and forth, Dr. Ranjit Singh above all, pushing it for 50 years, and ultimately you got the cheetah. And I have quoted in extensio the judgment of the Supreme Court, which is a remarkable judgment, and it should be read by all who are interested in conservation. So this is the story of the cheetah. Unfortunately, for me, it has come at a time where I cannot write more about the project itself. The story and the history, the ups and downs of this great project will be written by someone else, perhaps 10 or 20 years down the line. Please understand one thing very clearly, that the 20 cheetahs that have come, 8 from Namibia and 12 from South Africa, is a very small, very minor, in my opinion, beginning of a much larger project. And why do I say this? Just give me a moment. After this, I won't take any more of your time, I assure you. I'm sure you're all pretty bored with me. The effort to save the lion started in 1879. And it went through the administrations of 3 Nawabs of Junagadh, Bahadur Khan, Rasul Khanji, and Mahabat Khanji. And then through the government of the United States of Saurashtra, then the government of Bombay, then the government of Gujarat, and above all, the government of central government of India. It has taken 150 years for the lion to reach a population which, according to the official results of the government of Gujarat, is 600 and some odd. But when you ask them unofficially, they said they have a hell of a lot more lions. So it's taken 150 years. In 1952, the Chief Minister of Assam wrote a letter to Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to say that the rhino is practically extinct in Assam. 1952. We are talking 2022, 2023. 70 years later, we have 4,000 rhinos. When Dr. Ranjit Singh, he is the person, very humble, so I might blow the trumpet on his behalf, crucial man who was at the helm of affairs when the 1972-73 Project Tiger was declared. All right? At that time, the figure of tigers which they came up with was something like 1,823 or some such thing. Of course, there is no such thing. You can't put all tigers on a parade ground and say, give me your name, rank, and serial number. So somewhere around 1,800 tigers were believed to be present, whereas according to Dr. Ranjit Singh's own assessment, at the turn of the 20th century, there were perhaps 25,000 tigers. So that's the great decline which took place from that time to this time. And it has taken 50 years, I tell you, to bring the tiger population to 3,000, with many ups and downs along the way. So this cheetah program is a long drawn out program. It's not going to happen in a very short time. It's going to have lots of ups and lot of downs. There are certain down things happening right now. Hopefully we will get over it. I don't know. But I am not in a position to tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. With that, I will not take any more of your time, and I yield the floor. Thank you very much.
Can we now request Dr. Ranjitsinhji to release the book? Yeah. Dr. Ranjitsinhji, may I ask you to come and say a few words, please? Thank you.
Colleagues on the stage and friends. As a student of history and as a lover of nature, it's been my privilege and my opportunity to have read, really speaking, thousands of books, dissertations, and published materials of all kinds. And I say this not because this is written by Divyabhanu, but I honestly believe it. This is the finest history of an individual species, a wild animal, a wild bird, that I have ever come across. It is meticulously researched. It is not mundane. It is not overtly scientific. It is very easy reading, and it traces the life history, as it were, of this wonderful animal from its position of preeminence, of Akbar having as many as 1,000 cheetah in his pilkhanas at one point of time and 10,000 in his illustrious career, which shows what the prey was and how many cheetah there were. From that, it traces the poignant story of its decline into oblivion and ultimate extinction. As Divyabhanu pointed out, they didn't get extinct when the Maharaja of Korea shot them in 47, 48. They were there in the same place. His son has written to me, and his letter is on this book. You'd seen them in the same place in 1959, and they continued thereafter. But history teaches us certain lessons. To repeat the cliche, history repeats itself. History repeats itself because men continue to make the same blessed mistakes over and over again. They do not learn from the mistakes and the pitfalls which the others have had. And I hope the powers that be take that lesson from here. I regard extinctions of three kinds. Those species which went extinct, they went extinct because we did not have the wherewithal to stop that extinction. The cheetah is one. Incidentally, and this is a very proud record of India, despite its humongous population, pressure on land, poverty, ignorance, the rest, we have had a wonderful record. We have not lost a single large mammal, except for the two peripheral ones, the two rhinoceros, Sumatran and the Javan. They were peripheral, but they were there. But apart from that, the only large animal that has gone extinct in historical times is the cheetah. And that was why it had to come back. Because it brings back, and as was pointed out by Ravi, it, for one thing, the yearning for the lost prodigal son of India. whatever you've lost, you want to get back. That. But the second more important thing is that this country will not let an animal go extinct. And if that be the resolve, there is hope. Because ultimately it is the government that has to do the decisive action. But coming back to the extinction, the cheetah went extinct because we didn't know how to stop it. The second category is those species which I deem as allowed to go extinct because we knew how to stop it, we didn't do that. Perhaps the Malabar civet is one such. I think it's extinct and we allowed it to go extinct. And the next one, God forbid, would be the caracal. I would like the caracal to be saved under the aegis of the cheetah because it has to have cascading process. It's not, the cheetah project is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. It, just like the tiger project was, and just like the snow leopard project which we launched, to save something much more valuable than the animal itself, of which the animal is an important concomitant, but it's not the be-all and end-all, to habitat and everything that goes with it, and the cascading effect and the ramifications of saving that one mega species, charismatic or otherwise. So, the second one would be the cheetah. And the third category, alas, which I deem to be, is driven to extinction. Driven to extinction in this country by the very people who are enjoined by the Constitution of India to protect them. That is the irony of it. The Constitution of India is unique in many ways. It says it shall be. The fundamental duties. And it's a quid pro quo. There is no fundamental rights unless you fulfill your fundamental duties. It shall be the duty of shall, not will. Shall. It shall be the duty of every citizen of India to protect his forest and wildlife. And the directive principle of state polity says it shall be the duty of the government to save the forest and wildlife of India. Whether the two concomitants or the two bodies, individuals and the government are doing it, it's for you to decide. But it's that. And that would be the worst of all. Driven to extinction by the very people who the Constitution enjoys, must save it, and breaking the Constitution is much more grievous and serious than breaking any law. And if the bustard goes extinct, I will say, driven to extinction. Now, so much so for that. Coming to the book, it records, and I'm not talking about Afghanistan and the stragglers here and there, but I knew about it, but I learnt it from Divya's book because he documented it. That the last cheetahs in India went extinct not in the plains of Serengeti like situation. We didn't have them, but we had some wonderful plains which we have lost, and we need a grassland policy more than we do any other policy, but that's another matter. The last cheetah of the 20th century in India went extinct of all places in sal forests, not on the open field. So, and that is an eye-opener. How it's not optimal habitat, but it's where they've survived, where they continue to live with tenacity. And I then decided, and I learnt that, you confirmed my belief that you could, And I often toyed with the idea of bringing them into Sal Forest National Parks, where the frost hollows, which are not occupied by human beings or where we had vacated the villages, could be the habitat. And you would be interested to know that when we were in Ghana, the South Africans said that the best place for the cheetah now, apart from Kunu and Wanu, are Bandhavgarh and Ghana. I said, keep quiet. We have to have the Barasingha. I think we need to, otherwise they'll manage it for the cheetah and not for the grassland species. Yes? One had thought of that, but it shows that this was the case and this could thing. The last thing I would like to say, probably I'm overstepping, is that the cheetah would lead to something. We have got it back, it's a long way ahead, as I was telling you. This is just the beginning of the end. We have to go a long way. The work starts now, and this is where our application counts. The dedication, the science, and the determination, and the political will without which you can't do anything in this country. The cheetah brings a number of things in its wake, and he's highlighted in his book. One is the shifting of the focus from a single species, a single a species focus, emphasis, to a multiple one. There was a canard being spread. If you spread the tiger, you saved everything. Rubbish. What about the mountains? I've just signed a contract to publish a book on the mountain mammals, and would you be interested to know that of the 62 mountain mammals that I decree, that I have analyzed for the world over, 38 were in the Himalayas and Trans-Himalayas, and of which 32 were in undivided India. Undivided. And who cares about those mountain mammals? The entire longest mountain chain in the world, the Andes, has what I call 2.5 mountain species. I've seen 6 in one day, in 14 hours of walking and riding in Manala, in Changchenmo, in Ladakh. 6. That is the biodiversity. That must be saved, and what is more important, the source of water, especially after climate change, must be saved under the aegis of the snow leopard. And our grassland forest mosaics are our most productive ecosystems in the world and in India, must be saved with some kind of an icon. We are great worshippers of icons, and therefore that must be utilized to save that. And it's far more important in India because we have the largest livestock population in the world. And coming to icons, I'll just say this because it just struck me. Terrible news, but 2 priests put to death a poor man who, whilst cleaning the idol, dropped it and broke the finger of that idol. खंडित कर दिया. In India, खंडित मूर्ति को हम नहीं पूजते. We do not worship खंडित मूर्ति. What about those who खंडित करो the creation of God, the temples of God, the forests and wildlife, and of the national parks of India? Thank you very much.
Mr. Mahesh Rangarajan, please come and say something. Thanks.
Thank you.
So when Churchill was asked what he thought of Clement Attlee, he made one of the rudest remarks one prime minister can make of another. He said, Clement is a modest man. Clement is a modest man, he has much to be modest about. So I am a student of history, and I want to say this book makes me realize I have much to be modest about. Because many of you may or may not know this, but Dr. Divyabhanusinh was a Shagird of the great D.D. Kosambi. He has written a lovely piece in the Hindu about meeting Kosambi when he was young. I shouldn't say this here, but one of the things he did is he accompanied Kosambi in a jeep. The other three went on to become eminent historians, and among other things Kosambi did from the jeep was to shoot a black buck. But at that time it was not a protected species. So when this book came out in 95, it was published by Banyan Books at that time, The End of a Trail. There was a review, and the review ended by saying, the cheetah is of course a symbol of a wider set of issues. The question is whether India, where ecological questions take the backseat to the more pressing demands of growth, will heed the message of this book. After all, the loss of the cheetah is about more than just the extinction of a species. It symbolizes a new era of outright domination of the natural world. This work will help engender a deeper awareness not only about the follies of the past, but responsibility to the future. The cheetah is the only large mammal to have become extinct in independent India. What Dr. Ranjitsingh just reminded us. Perhaps this book will create an opinion that enables its return. The end of one trail may make for the beginning of another. It's this review which had a very interesting result, that the reviewer was invited to lunch at Taj Hotel by the author. And I'm sure you've guessed the reviewer was me and the author was Dr. Divyabhanusinh. I had a copy of the book. I had already got it for review. He then inscribed it. And he wrote something which I will always value. He said, it's nice to meet a kindred soul. So I am very struck by this book for two reasons. I am a historian of the 19th century. And after this book came out, I went back and started looking at the little bit of records I look at. And it's interesting, from around the 1870s to 1920s, there's a very large program. And it's called the program, it is, for the elimination of what are called dangerous beasts and venomous snakes. So it's a large program. It's an all India program. There are bounties given for these beasts and snakes. Different provinces give out different bounties. And as you can expect, there's been a lot of interest in the fact that dredging through these records, there's a younger historian who's now disproven my figures, which is nice. I had said 80,000. He finds it 79,000 something. But no, what is significant is that this large drive to eliminate these beasts of prey was part of a process of imperial pacification and conquest. The post-1857 India sees the Arms Act in 1870 when Indians were disarmed. Before this, many villagers had arms. I teach in Ashoka University in Sonipat, and you may be interested that Dirk Kolff has written that soldiers in early 19th century, late 18th were very worried going out of Delhi, because in some cases the villagers captured them and not only took away their weapons, but took away their upper garments and clothes and then sent them off. This changes in the 19th century, and I think it is not a coincidence that the Arms Act of 1870 is followed by this attempt to wipe out dangerous beasts and poisonous snakes. These are seen as, the equivalent of the earlier campaigns against thuggy, dakati and bandits. Now this second edition of this book, which is a rewrite, it's very important, the last two chapters. To me, the second last is important because that figure of 80,000 tigers, the figures for wolves is around 200,000, leopards is around 200,000. I want to emphasize these are animals which are killed. The skin or some body part has been produced before a Tahsildar, who has then verified it and given a reward. This is in British India. It includes some princely states. So about 1/3 of India is only partially covered. Now the figures in this book are very important. So I did a small paper which I wrote in 98, and Dr. Divyabhanusinh in the second edition of the old book was kind enough to produce it in extensio. As it turns out, that paper was incomplete. The estimate there was every year in this 50-year period, I owe this to him, my mathematics is very bad, 1.3 cheetahs are killed a year. This book
includes the material gathered by him and my dear friend Raza Kazmi, and it gives us a higher figure which takes us to 400 to 450 cheetahs. It's a very low number. And I want to emphasize this. It's not the number we should look at. We should keep in mind that India is the western edge of the cheetah's global range. This book has a very interesting map for me. It takes the cheetah's range eastward into Bengal, eastward. But the southern range, which I am fascinated, I was very struck by these figures when I first saw it, that the southernmost range, according to the bounty hunting, is Tirunelveli, which is Tamil Nadu. So the cheetah is part of an ecotype, the Ethiopian realm. And this realm is marked by certain kinds of associations of animals and birds and plants. The cheetah and the gazelle, lion and the antelope, the rattle and the drongo, the acacia tree, and so on and so forth. And this particular realm extended from central West Asia through north central India into the Deccan and right to the south. So I emphasize the southern range of the black buck. It's very important. Those of you who follow recently, Sanjay Gubbi has written a very nice book in which he shows, a Chinkara population which is found in Karnataka and a sanctuary declared. So I think this ecotype is very crucial. In the 1880s, we got to something very interesting, which was a census. 1872, 1881. Same time when they're killing all these animals. And the census did something very interesting. For the first time, there's an estimate of how many people lived in India. And the density is very important. In 1881, the density is 80 to a square kilometer. Just to put a number, the last census, it was over 400 to a square kilometer. So at 80 to a square kilometer, what was the landscape? And here is the interesting part. There's a very little cited paper by the late John Richards, one of the very great historians, particularly of Mughal India, where they estimated, they looked at all the figures of the 1880s, and this can be debated, but I think it's an interesting figure. Possibly 1/5 of British Imperial India, Balochistan to Burma, 1/5, 20%, was tree-covered, tree-dotted savanna. It's one of the largest land areas within India. And it is very significant that this is the area where these species I have recounted live. And it's not a coincidence that the lion by 1900 is down to one population in Gir. The cheetah, clearly, I think Dr. Divyabhanusingh's book shows, between the 1900s and 60s was on the way out. It's difficult to find places which seem to have a viable population. One of the issues raised, and I'm very happy the paper which was written, this book has led to critical writing. Without critical writing, where would we be? Is that there are so few instances. But I think there's a reason. The reason is very important. Much of the material we have, and I'm not referring to archival records, I'm referring to memoirs, hunting accounts, journals, letters, and let's face it, self-glorificatory articles, some articles by first-rate naturalists as well. These focus on animals which were regarded as big game species. The tiger, the gaur, the sambha, and so on. The cheetah doesn't quite count there because it doesn't have a history, good for it, of attacking and killing people. You won't find the equivalent of the man-eating leopard of Rudraprayag or the man-eaters of Kumaon. Because it is not large enough, and remember size, remember the Coke ad? Taste not size, it's the opposite. Size not taste. Size, it just didn't figure. So this figure which is being given in the work of Divyabhanusinh and Raza Kazmi probably is an undercount of the number shot by sportsmen. But those accounts which survive are interesting because they include spearing of cheetahs after riding them down on horseback. They include encountering more than one cheetah in a day and shooting all of them. So I think we need to realize this larger culture of conquest, domination, shikar, bounty hunting, civilizing, transforming, what we would today call destroying a landscape, is very significant in the late 19th, early 20th century. And it happens before population growth of the sort we know it happens. At this time, population growth rate is about 0.5%. The kind of growth rates we think of start in the 20s. The cheetahs already getting hammered before that. It's very important. There's a second feature with the cheetah, which is very interesting. I was very struck when Dr. Divyabhanusinh was saying, because he said MK Ranjtsinhji, Divyabhanusinh, and all of them. And as you know, this is a lineage. But look at the cheetah's lineage. O'Brien has shown that the cheetah is probably of the large cat species, the one which has the lowest genetic variation because of genetic bottleneck thousands of years ago. Now, I don't know, maybe it's 2000 years ago. The similar species which he recounts in his book, Tales of the Cheetah, is the Gir lion. But the Gir lion is found in one place, and we now know, new phenotypic studies, that the lion of Gir is possibly very similar or identical to the lions of North Africa, where they're extinct, in West Africa. But with the cheetah, it's much closer related. Any cheetah anywhere is more closely related than tigers anywhere or leopards anywhere. This itself makes it vulnerable. But the other, of course, is that this idea of introduction of the cheetah, critics call it introduction, those who support it call it reintroduction. I'm not a biologist, so I'm not going to get into whether it's African or Indian. I'll come back to it in a moment. Can also be seen in a different way. You see, India became independent in 1947. Sitting in Delhi, one cannot but forget that independence came with partition. It was both a moment of celebration and a moment of sorrow. And one person for whom it was a moment of sorrow was the Nawab of Junagadh. And I can't resist saying this before this audience. I grew up on a story where when anyone said Nawab of Junagadh, we'd start laughing. Because we'd been told, I think this is completely untrue, you have to correct me, that he left 2 of his 4 wives behind but took all his 8 favorite dogs. I have no idea of this. But the Nawab of Junagadh leaving created a very serious crisis for the lions of Gir. There was a telegram sent by the Society for Preservation of Fauna of the Empire. Bunch of aristocrats in England, UK. Aristocracy in the 19th century was a dying species anyway, but they decided, since their fortunes were on the downhill, they would reinvent a role by saving other dying species, and one of them, they decided in 1948, would be the lions of Gir. They sent a telegram to a figure who is not very fashionable now, Jawaharlal Nehru. And on 2nd February 1948, Jawaharlal Nehru dictates a note which then goes to N.M. Butch, who was the administrator of Junagadh, which was taken over by the Arzi Hukumat. So Junagadh, the Nawab having fled, Indian army had to go in and take over the place. And there's a very interesting story of how Nehru's intervention, with the help of Siveshwarkar and Butch, this is told in Dr. Divyabhanusingh's other book, I've written about it elsewhere, they protect the Gir lion. तो नवाब साहब की जो विरासत थी ना, वो आज़ाद भारत की विरासत बन गई. The heritage of Nawab of Junagadh became the heritage of independent India. It also became the heritage of the Arzi Hukumat, the people's government, which was headed by someone related to another son of Kathiawar, Mahatma Gandhi. The head of the Arzi Hukumat was Samal Das Gandhi. Disappears from the pages of history. The nephew, he's the head of the Arzi Hukumat. In 1949, something more interesting happened. A very young archaeologist, S.L. Rao, reported that there were remains of the Indus civilization in Lothal. Now it's very interesting. Within 6 weeks, there's a team of archaeologists which goes from Delhi and goes to Lothal. Many things have changed in India. One thing hasn't changed: the fascination with the heritage of the past. You can't have a country without a sense of monumental heritage. Indus. The Indus Valley civilization was not just in Pakistan. There were Indus Valley sites across large parts of India. Very, very critical. And the lion, did it become Indian? But more interesting, in February 1948, there's a telegram. I've never heard of this organization anywhere else. It says, you must protect the lion, Mr. Prime Minister, and we are writing to you on the behalf of the Naturalist Society of Gujarat. See, the sense of being Gujarati predates the creation of Gujarat in 1960. So in 1948, the lion was on the way to becoming Indian and becoming Gujarati. The cheetah had no such voice. And I want to emphasize this. You see, I am very struck by iconic conservation. Iconic conservation is part of our heritage. But when we celebrate a heritage, we should also question it. One of the reasons the lion captured the imagination is because of its roar. You think of the Simhanada of the Buddha. NTR, when, his party was broken by his son-in-law, he had a rally. It was called the Simha Garjana rally, the rally of the lion's roar. In the rally itself, he said that his son-in-law, the Telugu version is better, but I'll say it in English, he said his son-in-law was a wolf who had scratched himself. And he was not really a tiger because only a tiger has the tiger stripes. So see, these animals are very central in our lore, in our literature, in our cultures. Not so the cheetah. I am emphasizing this. So this fascination with the tiger in the late 60s, early 70s, it gets transformed from being a trophy animal shot as game into a conservation icon. The tiger became Indian. The lion in 1972 became the state animal of Gujarat. The cheetah didn't find a place. And I think here it's very significant. This is the first full-length book on the cheetah in India ever written. It's written as late as 1995. I found another book, but it's not only on the cheetah. And I have to thank Raza. We have an archive of contemporary India in Ashoka, and let me say my bit. We have 60 sets of private papers. We have the papers of Dr. Ranjit and Dr. Divyabhanusinh. So everything you want to know about the cheetah, we have all of these things being referred to. We have them. Please come and see them. I want to come back. In the 1970s, there was no book on the cheetah. But in the 60s, Rajesh Bedi wrote a book, Cheetah or Tendua. It's a wonderful book in Hindi which explains it between the cheetah and leopard, but after reading it, it's a taxonomical book. Many people in popular parlance didn't know the difference between these two. So is the timing of the cheetah introduction or reintroduction right? Should it be done at all? Is it taking away from other conservation? Is Kuno really a grassland? Here I want to say something of significance. One of the people who's done phenomenal work in recent years on Indian ecologies is Dr. Jayashree Ratnam of NCBS. He's published very important papers and found something very interesting. Sometimes you can be looking at something, you call it by another name, and therefore you misread what it is. She argues, and very, very good material, she's worked on savannas in many parts of the world, that much of India was savanna. And that savanna got classified as forest by people as learned as Harry Champion and Seth, because they were foresters. They were looking for trees. They missed the grassland. So this larger notion of an ecology and a biome has been overshadowed in the last 50 years, if I may say so, by two icons, the tiger and the forest. 90% of India doesn't have tigers. Probably most of it never did. There were no tigers in the Thar, Himalayas, we can go on. Much of India was not forest. We just said so. It was tree-dotted savanna or cold desert or hot desert or marsh or estuarine or whatever. So this broadening of consciousness, the cheetah becomes a bridge to that. Just as the tiger, Project Tiger was also a bridge from an animal-centered view to an ecological view. Because Project Tiger opened up the idea that there is a notion of the entire ecological system. Now, of course, there are justice issues with the cheetah. There are questions about whose land this is, what its implications are, how should it be protected. But I am very struck by something. Already in a few months, we've had cheetahs moving across a larger landscape. Madhav National Park, a village. There's something very simple. In this country and in many parts of Asia, perhaps large parts of Africa, animals and people are part of a continuum. This idea of drawing a sharp line actually is not there in the history. It's very recent. So maybe it was necessary at a certain time. Is it the only way? Are there other ways? Should there be other ways? I won't get into this, but I will address one question. I was very struck a few years ago by the publication of a book called Exotic Aliens in India, The Lion and the Cheetah. And since two of the authors are people I deeply respect, I don't know the third, Professor Ramnath Thapar, great historian, Valmik Thapar, outstanding conservationist, tiger author. But one of the points it makes is very important. It argues that the cheetah was probably introduced into India by the Turks. Now, I think this book more or less conclusively shows that cheetahs have been here for millennia. There's associations with them in literature, art and culture through centuries. But even if we were to assume that cheetahs were introduced, would that be possible? It's very rare. There are many animals which are invasive. You could think of the rabbit in Australia, the tar near Cape Town in the uplands of South Africa. You could think of the red deer in New Zealand. We can go on with a long list. But is there a large carnivore, terrestrial carnivore, which has been introduced into a large landmass, which has so many species of carnivores already, which has not only gone free, but which has bred, propagated, and established populations? I don't think so. Actually, there is a case, but it's a different one. It's the dingo and the thylacine in Australia, but you'll agree that Australia didn't have a large complement of predators as India did. So this question of the alien should be posed differently. How long does a species have to live in a country before it ceases to be alien? 1 generation, 2 generations, 10 generations. Should alien or native be judged by point of origin or by the way it blends into that larger fabric? I think the answer is obvious. India has many species which did not evolve in what is today India. You call it what you like. Undivided India, Indian subcontinent, South Asia. So a lot of the work shows that the tiger probably originated in China, or what becomes the tiger originated in China. It walked across. Homo sapiens, incidentally, there is a debate whether African Eve is our ancestor or not, but a lot of us are the result of African Eve. So rather than go into origins, one should look at 2 different dimensions. The process of extinction is a legacy of the period of British imperial rule. That rule, that very brief period, 1850s to 1940s, transformed this country in many ways, politically, economically, culturally, and this began with the East India Sarkar as well. But one of its major implications is animals that were part of the landscape disappeared, vanished, became extinct. And when you look at the 20th century, it's striking. The Sumatran rhino, Javan rhino, easternmost edge of the range. Sikkim stag or shao, southernmost part of the range. Banteng, again, extreme end of the range. But the cheetah of all of these had the largest of the ranges. Therefore, the debate on the cheetah is not about the past. The debate on the cheetah is what do you do about the past. One thing you can't do is change it, but you can learn from it. And here is the second part. This tapestry is not only about the cheetah, it's about that larger ecology. And these various ecotypes in which it roamed. There wasn't one kind of savanna or one kind of forest. There wasn't one kind of prey base, there were many. And I'm very struck, I must confess, I start reading books from the end. There were photos of cheetahs with 3 or 4 kinds of prey in this, and they were all from Kuno. Very interesting. Cheetah with a cheetal and a cheetah having killed a sambar and so on. But the human dimension will remain with us. Because iconic conservation, while it has had a lot of pluses, and we know this with the story of the tiger, also involved a lot of costs. So who pays the cost, who makes the gains is a very important one. But just to say that this is an unusual book, I think it would be an exaggeration to say that the end of a trail, the cheetah in India, led to its reintroduction. I don't think that would be true. However, if there has been a serious public debate on this, if there has been awareness with a level of information, with credible knowledge of the past, and I must say this again, this remarkable ability to read the natural history from the miniatures, from the texts, from Sanskrit, Farsi, and I know the author has drawn on several other scholars, but he's the one who put the synthesis together. You know, kala to inka hai, usme samagri kai logon ne diya hoga. Is that this is a call to think about the past, because you can't prepare for the future if we ignore the past. And one of the things about the past is that it has very painful and troubled legacies. And I think that these processes of extinctions, like the neglect of great monuments, you know, we are, just go to Lodi Gardens and see I love you Asha or I love you Poppy written. I mean, that is what we are also dealing with. How do we deal with that is up to all of us. But I think we should really appreciate the significance of this book, Marg for the production and Dr. Divyabhanusinh for the meticulous work. He's always used to tell me that you are the professor and I am the Khansama. I am not a Khansama, but you can see who the professor is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. We now have some time for question and answers. So if I may request 2 of the mics on either side, and please. Yeah, if you can talk on the mic, so. Is it on?
While listening, I was.
Yeah, go ahead.
While listening to Officer, I was inquisitive to know, does cheetah have some reference drawn from our? Do you find any reference of such species in our Puranas, epics? That could be a clue.
Yeah, the earliest reference to the cheetah that I have come across, I'm talking chronologically, is by Strabo. Strabo was a great historian of ancient Greece. He was more or less the contemporary of Jesus Christ, perhaps a little later. He writes that when an Indian king washes his hair, that means it was an anointing ceremony that used to happen at the time, buffaloes, bisontes, which are perhaps cows, leontes, which are lions, and pardales walk in the procession. Pardalis is a Greek word for a cheetah, a Greek word for a cat which kills. Then you come to Claudius Alienus, who was writing about 150 years after Christ. And he is a guy writing in classical Latin in Rome. And he has written a book on animals. And that book on animals mentions that when Indians bring to their king four-horned oryxes and pantheras. Now, four-horned oryxes, we all know, are four-horned antelopes, all right? It's only, they are endemic to India, they are not found anywhere outside India at all. And pantheras is again a Latin word for both leopard and a cheetah. But no self-respecting leopard would walk up to a king. I mean, he'd much rather eat him, or it's more leopard. So it's got to be a cheetah. Then if you come to the Amar Kosha, which of course there is an issue about the date. The earliest date ascribed to Amar Kosh is 4th century AD, and the later date is something like 7th century AD. But then ancient Indian history, I hope there are no ancient Indian historians, is a matter of hit and miss. So Amar Kosh recalls lists animals which are panchanakas, 5-clawed, okay, 5-clawed, and they belong to the jati of Vyagra, means the species of tigers. And it says these are Simha, Vyagra, Dvipi, Chitraka. Right? Dvipi is the leopard, Chitraka is a cheetah. Then you come to the 11th century, now the 12th century, the 12th century king Someshwara III, southern Chalukya dynasty from present-day Kalyani, compiled a very interesting book called Manasolasa. Manasolasa is a compendium of the pastimes at a royal court. Now, this is very interesting. And he lists things like Shen Vinoda, which is falconry, Swan Vinoda, which is playing with dogs, Matsya Vinoda, which is fishing, and then he calls Brigya Vinoda. Brigya Vinoda meaning, Brigya here, the word Brigya is deer, hunting deer. And Manasolasa describes 31 type of methods of hunting deer out of 35 known at that time. And one of them is called Vyagraja Mrigya. Now Vyagraja Mrigya is hunting with tigers. But what does it say? That you tame a Chitraka, make him walk through the streets until it becomes yours, and then let it loose on Krishnasara, which is the black buck. So that's 12th century, and then by the time you come to the 13th and 14th centuries of the time of Sultana Razia in here, where her noblemen are hunting cheetahs around Delhi. Firoz Shah Tughlaq, if you look at Tarikhi Firoz Shahi, the Firoz Shah Tughlaq's menagerie had so many cheetahs uses the Persian word use, had so many ewes and caracal, or rather siagosh, what we call siagosh, which is a caracal, that you cannot count them. And I think Dr. Ranjit Singh already referred to Emperor Akbar's 1,000 cheetahs at a time seen by foreign travelers, and Emperor Jahangir himself says that during my father's time he had 1,000 cheetahs at any one point of time, and he tried to breed them and they didn't breed, but in my time they bred. All right, but that's another story, I won't go into it. So you have this unbroken line
from about 2,500 years, because you find them on cave paintings, cheetahs also. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but this is what I have found.
Yeah.
India, and thereby spoiling the native gene pool, the gene pool of the native Indian cheetah. Is this correct?
There are no Indian cheetahs, so how do you?
No, but you just said that they've been here for around.
Yeah, correct. But they're all dead and
2,500
gone. So where is the question of ruining their gene pool? Today, Asian cheetahs are found only in Iran. The figure is supposed to be 40, of which only 12 have been identified through camera traps. All right, there are no Asian cheetahs that apart anywhere in the world. So there's no question of messing up with the gene pool. Also, I think Dr. Ranjitsingh said very clearly that or was it Dr. Rangarajan, that the difference between Asiatic and African cheetah is so small that it is perhaps just one cheetah. I'll tell you one specific instance. Stephen O'Brien, who is the father of cat genetics in the world, he conducted, or his laboratory conducted, an experiment where they took a piece of skin from a leopard, one leopard, and grafted it on another. That skin was rejected in exactly 3 days. Then they did a similar experiment, took a skin from one cheetah and grafted it on another. It took them 3 weeks. So it speaks for all total genetic uniformity. I won't say total, but near total genetic uniformity. So I don't personally see any difference or any problem whether this is an African or an Asian cheetah.
Isn't there a difference between the Indian cheetah
But
and the
the
Namibian
only
cheetah?
difference I have found, okay, the only difference is morphological difference. Genetically, there is a lot of variation in ideas. The only difference I have found, I examined with the help of my Mughal art guru Ashok Kumar Das, 63 paintings of the Mughal period, which showed cheetahs in full. All of these cheetahs, tips of the tail were black. So I wrote to people in Africa and I said, I have seen lots of cheetahs of Africa with very pronounced white tips of tail. What percentage of cheetahs have black tips of tail? Laurie Marker did a survey and she wrote back to me to say that about 20% of the cheetahs that she had seen in Namibia had black tipped tails. The rest of them had all white tipped tails. Now this is a morphological observation made by me, not entirely accepted by the scientists. And by the way, it's not something which is my theory, it is something which I have observed. So if anybody has a problem with my observation, he should write to the Mughals, not to me.
So why did this conservationist get so agitated about it?
I think somebody at the back.
Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for a lovely evening. We've learned so much. There have been press reports that a tiger from Ranthambore has walked into Kuno. Did you find any accounts anywhere of the relationship or how these two species interact?
Yeah, well, actually, if you look at the map that we have, not so much me, but this young, brilliant scholar, Raza Kazmi, I wanted to write his name first in this paper, but he just wouldn't allow me, and he put my name first, which I don't deserve. If you look at the range of the cheetah, it is found all over the place where you would expect, not all over, but hell of a lot of places where you would expect the tiger to be. All right? The issue is simple. If there is a cheetah and tiger in the same landscape, chances are they would be occupying different niches. That does not mean that there was no interaction between tigers and cheetahs. There was. I have gone through British records with a very fine tooth comb, and God knows how many hundreds of documents I must have seen. I found only one reference of a tiger having killed a cheetah, and that was in Nimat, which is now in Madhya Pradesh, but that area at that time was in Rajasthan. And I think the tigers, okay, fine. I asked the South African experts who were here, Tordif and Vincent, they just laughed it out. They said that tigers are such clumsy animals that cheetahs can handle them. Yeah, please.
On this matter of juxtaposition of species, one of the capture sites of the Mughal times of cheetah, if you look at Irfan Habib's map, is in Shiopur, between Shiopur and Shiopuri, very close to Kunu. Kunu had all the 4 great cats: lion, tiger, leopard, cheetah. And the lion and the tiger coexisting, if you look at the paintings of Kota, which is next door, the lion and the tiger appearing in the same beat. And the classic story about Jahangir, after doing his obeisance at the dargah of Nizamuddin Aulia, he went, and behind it, where not a tree stops there, is Taragarh. And he had a beat, and he records that a lion came out, and the Empress, Noor Jahan, who actually ruled the country, took my permission. And I gave the permission, and she shot the lion with one shot. At that sound of the report of the musket, there was an uproar. And a tiger came out and wanted to break back the beat. But the beaters did not allow the tiger to go. So she rushed past, that tiger rushed past the machan or wherever they were sitting, the machan. And this time, without taking my permission, the emperor bowled it over with one shot. I was so pleased with her shooting that on the machan I gave her 3,500 gold coins. 2 same machan. What are we talking about?
Hello, sir. Sir, I'm Gaurav from, I work with Press Trust of India. Hello. Sir,
Yeah, sure.
sir, there have been multiple reports about cheetahs wandering outside Kuno. And I just wanted to know, as the government said, are they just exploring the areas, or does it have something to do with the carrying capacity of the KNP?
Okay, let me answer that, and I'll give it over to Dr. Ranjitsingh. There is only one cheetah that I know that wandered out of Kuno, all right? Now, frankly, you can say there's perhaps not enough prey that it came across. Maybe it was just exploring a place. See, at the end of the day, let's be very clear. Any animal, whether it is a cat or otherwise, even if it's not a gregarious animal or gregarious cat like a lion, it looks for smells and signs of other members of the same species. Now, this animal was one of the first to be released out of its boma. Maybe, I'm not saying I'm correct. Maybe one of the reasons is that it did not find the signs of any other species, any other animal of the same species, and that's possibly the reason why he may have wandered out looking for something. Possible. But I am not the expert on cheetah. I keep telling you, I'm not an expert on cheetahs. I leave it to other people to talk about, and I'll hand over the mic to Dr. Ranjitsingh.
Oban walked out. Yes. There are 3 kinds of cheetahs. Those that are totally wild caught, those that were born outside but have been tamed and have been rewilded also, and those that have been born in captivity. Those born in captivity are the totally wild one, and it is a natural instinct to go out and search. And go out and search, because the cheetah is not territorial. They have home ranges, they are not territorial like a lion or a tiger. Anyway, the Oban is wild caught, and he escaped. He walked out. He walked out in similar habitat outside, and he was also looking for prey. And it's very significant. He went and caught an animal like the black buck, and that's what I have been shouting hoarse. We need black buck in Kuno. We need black bucks to supplement that. Cheetah alone will not do, but that's another story. So the other one, interestingly, is also wild caught, Asha. And she walked out but came back again. The males go out. The males go out. This is the problem with males, you see. They look for females. And that is why more male busters get killed in collisions than females do. Females are actually better evolved. They are better specimens of their kind world over, male, female of any species. Because nature wants them to be the male has finished with his job after procreation. And they have more sense too. They remain where they are, they look after the young, they know where they are. These jokers go out and they get killed. So Oban and all these males also go out looking for females. And you pay the price when you look for females like that.
Shall we end that on a very happy note? Thank you so much. Please pick up a book on your way out. Thank you.